The snap of my shin bone was sickeningly loud, but the silence from the man standing over me was worse. He looked at my twisted leg not with horror, but with calculation. He believed a broken wife would be easier to rob. He made a fatal error in judgment. As I reached for the phone, I did not dial 911. I called my father and gave a single order. Leave no survivors. My name is Victoria, and 32 years of privileged life had not prepared me for the sight of my husband burying his face in the neck of his secretary on my Italian leather sofa. The drive back to our Hamptons estate had been peaceful, the Atlantic Ocean shimmering under the moonlight. I had cut my charity trip short to surprise Marcus. The surprise was mine. Rage is not a fire. It is a cold, sharp thing that slices through the chest. I dropped my overnight bag on the marble floor. The heavy thud made them jump. Monica scrambled to cover her nakedness with a throw blanket, her eyes wide with fake innocence, while Marcus just looked annoyed at the interruption. I walked over and delivered a slap that echoed like a gunshot in the vaulted living room. Her head snapped back violently. "Get out!" I screamed, my voice raw and unfamiliar to my own ears. "Get out of my house! You filth, both of you!" Marcus did not apologize. He did not beg. He stood up, towering over me, a sneer replacing the charming smile that had fooled me for 5 years. He shoved me hard. I stumbled back, my heels catching on the edge of the rug. Before I could regain my balance, he lifted his heavy boot and brought it down on my right shin with terrifying force. The sound was wet and crunching. It was the sound of a dry branch snapping, magnified 1,000 times inside my own body. White-hot agony exploded up my leg. I collapsed, gasping for air that refused to come. I looked down and saw the unnatural angle of my lower leg. I reached for my phone with trembling fingers, but Marcus was faster. He snatched it from my hand and slid it into his pocket. Then, he did something that chilled me more than the pain. He walked over to the bar cart. The clinking of crystal was the only sound in the room besides my jagged breathing. He poured a glass of vintage red, my favorite vintage, and handed it to Monica. She fell, Marcus said, sipping the wine as he looked down at me with dead eyes. Drunk again. Stumbled down the stairs. Monica giggled, a nervous, high-pitched sound that grated on my nerves. Is that what we tell the police?" "No police," Marcus replied smoothly, sitting down on the sofa I had just kicked them off of. "Just an ambulance. But not yet. Let the swelling set in. If we wait, maybe the tissue dies. A cripple is easier to manage than a wife." They waited for 2 hours. 120 minutes of hell. Every time I tried to crawl toward the door, pain spiked through my body, pinning me to the floor. I watched the clock on the wall tick by, realizing that every minute was stealing a piece of my future mobility. "Please. Marcus, it hurts so much. I can't breathe." I whimpered, the shock making my teeth chatter uncontrollably. "Shh." He hushed me, mocking my pain. "Save your strength. Victoria, you will need it to explain your alcoholism to the doctors." By the time the sirens finally cut through the night air, my leg was a swollen purple ruin. The paramedics rushed in with their equipment. Marcus instantly transformed. He fell to his knees beside me, tears streaming down his face in a performance worthy of an award. Oh God, my wife, she's been drinking all day. I tried to catch her, but she fell so hard. I tried to speak. I tried to say he did this. But the pain was a heavy blanket, suffocating my words. One of the paramedics administered a morphine shot, and the world tilted sideways. They loaded me into the ambulance. We did not go to the nearest trauma center. We went to a private facility, one where Marcus played golf with the chief of surgery. As the fluorescent lights flashed overhead, dragging me down corridors that smelled of antiseptic and money, I realized the truth. This was not a rescue. This was an incarceration. Consciousness returned in slow, jagged waves. I opened my eyes to a ceiling that was too white and a silence that felt heavy. My right leg was no longer my own. It was a heavy anchor, encased in plaster and elevated on a sling, throbbing with a dull, rhythmic agony that synchronized with my heartbeat. Metal pins protruded from the cast like torture devices. I tried to shift, but a nurse seated in the corner stood up immediately. She was not smiling. Her uniform was crisp, and her eyes were cold, devoid of any compassion. Marcus had chosen his staff well. They were not healers, they were wardens. The door opened, and Marcus walked in. He carried a bouquet of lilies, the kind you buy for funerals. To anyone passing in the hallway, he looked like the devoted husband. He closed the door, and the mask dropped instantly. He approached the bed and leaned down, his breath smelling of stale coffee and mints against my ear. "You look terrible, darling," he whispered, his hand resting on the call button, effectively guarding it. "The doctor says the surgery was complex. If you say a word, just one single word about what really happened, I will have to authorize a second surgery." I stared at him, my throat dry as sandpaper. "We can call it a post-operative complication," he continued, his fingers tracing the line of my jaw. "A stroke, perhaps. Or maybe just enough oxygen deprivation to leave you as a vegetable. You would be a lovely doll then. Victoria. Silent and compliant forever. Fear, cold and paralyzing, washed over me." I nodded slowly, tears leaking from the corners of my eyes. I understand." I choked out. Later that afternoon, Monica arrived. She breezed in wearing a pastel dress, carrying a basket of fruit as if she were the concerned best friend. She sat by my bedside, peeling an orange with deliberate slowness. "The house feels so much bigger without you there," she said, popping a slice of orange into her mouth. "Marcus and I were thinking of repainting the master bedroom. That gray you chose is so depressing. Maybe a warm cream, it will look better with the new furniture we are ordering with your credit cards." I clenched my fists under the sheets but forced my face to remain slack and defeated. "Please, just don't hurt me again," I begged, injecting a tremor into my voice. It was the performance of my life. I needed them to see a broken woman, not a dormant volcano. By evening, my in-laws, Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, arrived. They did not ask about my pain. They did not ask about the surgery. Mrs. Harrison looked at my cast with disdain, as if my injury were a personal insult to her fashion sense. "Really, Victoria," she sighed, adjusting her pearls. "How could you be so clumsy falling down the stairs like a drunkard? Marcus is launching his new venture next week. Do you have any idea how bad this looks for the family image? A wife in a cast screams instability. We are handling it," Marcus assured his parents. Through the haze of pain medication, I listened as they moved to the window, lowering their voices. They thought I was asleep. "The lawyers have the papers ready," Marcus said softly, "with the medical report stating she is mentally unstable due to substance abuse and trauma. The judge will grant emergency conservatorship. We will have control of her trust fund by the end of the month." "Good," his father grunted. "That money is wasted on her charities. They left me alone in the dark eventually." The night nurse was less vigilant than the day shift. I could hear her snoring softly in the chair by the door. This was my only chance. I grit my teeth. Every movement sent bolts of lightning shooting up my leg. I dragged myself out of the bed, the heavy cast scraping against the sheets. I lowered myself to the floor, stifling a scream as gravity pulled at my shattered bone. I crawled, inch by agonizing inch. I dragged my body across the cold linoleum toward the ensuite bathroom. Inside, I pulled myself up to the sink. My reflection was a ghost, pale, bruised, with dark circles under my eyes. I opened the supply closet. There, on the top shelf, behind a stack of towels, was a cheap cracked smartphone. I had seen a janitor leave it there earlier when he was restocking, likely forgetting it in his rush. My hands shook violently as I powered it on. It had 12% battery. I did not call the police. The police could be bought. I dialed the one number I had sworn never to call again. The number of the man I had abandoned for the monster who broke me. The line rang once, twice. Speak. A deep, gravelly voice answered. I slid down to the floor, clutching the phone like a lifeline. "Dad," I whispered, my voice breaking. They broke my leg. They want to take everything. Dad, please, don't let anyone survive in that house. I spoke the words into the receiver, my voice trembling not with fear, but with the release of a 5-year suppression. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy, charged with a violence that only a man like my father could command. He did not ask how. He did not ask why I had stayed away for so long. He simply accepted the war I had just declared. In 1 hour, his voice came through, steady and terrifyingly calm. You will see hell open its doors for them. The line went dead. I deleted the call log, wiped the phone with my shirt, and placed it back on the shelf. I dragged myself back to the bed, the pain in my legs screaming with every inch, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years. I lay there and waited. Exactly 59 minutes later, the door to my room did not open. It was thrown wide. The nurse Marcus had hired to watch me stood up to protest, but she was silenced immediately by a large hand clamping over her mouth. 4 men in immaculate black suits entered the room. They moved with a fluidity and precision that Marcus's cheap security detail could never hope to replicate. Leading them was Arthur, my father's personal attorney and consigliere, a man who could ruin a life with a single contract clause. "Mrs. Victoria," Arthur said, nodding respectfully. "We are leaving." They lifted me onto a gurney with gentle efficiency. As we moved through the corridors, I saw the bodies of Marcus's guards slumped in chairs or leaning against walls, unconscious but alive. My father's men were professionals. They did not make a mess unless ordered to. We reached the hospital lobby. A crowd of reporters had gathered, summoned by Marcus for a pitiful press conference. He stood before a bank of microphones, dabbing at dry eyes with a silk handkerchief. "My wife's condition is critical," he was saying, his voice cracking theatrically. "We ask for privacy during this." He stopped mid-sentence as he saw me emerge, flanked by a phalanx of men who looked like they carved stone for a living. 2 of my father's guards stepped forward and seized Marcus by the arms, twisting them behind his back. The cameras flashed wildly. Marcus's face went from grief to shock to terror in a second. "What is the meaning of this, unhand me?" he shrieked. One of the guards prepared to drive a knee into Marcus's gut, but I raised my hand. "Stop," I said. My voice was weak, but the command was absolute. Arthur looked down at me. "Ma'am." "Not yet," I whispered, staring at the sweat beading on my husband's forehead. "I want him to bleed slowly." I signaled for them to release him. Marcus stumbled forward, trying to regain his composure for the cameras. But the damage was done. The narrative had shifted. I was taken to a private medical facility in upstate New York, a place that resembled a fortress more than a hospital. 2 days later, as the fog of anesthesia lifted, my father handed me a thick leather folder. "I have had him under surveillance for 6 months, my father said, sitting in the armchair by my bed. He looked older, but his eyes were as sharp as diamonds. He is not a businessman. Victoria, he is a parasite." I opened the file. The pages detailed a life of smoke and mirrors. Marcus was not just a bad husband, he was a professional con artist. The successful tech startups he bragged about were shell companies. The profits were fabrications, but the most damning document was near the back. He owed nearly $4 million to a loan shark syndicate in New Jersey. I flipped the page and felt my blood turn to ice. There was a copy of a mortgage deed. He forged your signature, my father explained, his voice low. He mortgaged your Hamptons estate to pay the interest on his debts and to fund a cryptocurrency scam. The bank is days away from foreclosing. I closed the folder. The pain in my leg was a dull throb now, overshadowed by a cold, calculating fury. He had broken my body to steal the very roof over my head. He wanted me incapacitated so he could finalize the theft before I noticed. I can have him in prison by tonight, my father offered. Or I can have him disappear. No, I said, looking out the window at the gray sky. If he goes to prison now, he becomes a victim. He blames the system. I want him to know it was me. I want to watch him realize he is lost. I turned to Arthur. Prepare the discharge papers, I said. I am going home. I want to play with my husband one last time. My return to the estate was not the quiet surrender Marcus had anticipated. I rolled up the driveway in a custom titanium wheelchair, flanked by two men who looked like they chewed gravel for breakfast. I introduced them as private nurses hired by my father, but the bulge of shoulder holsters under their jackets told a different story. Marcus stood on the porch, his smile tight and his eyes darting nervously to my escorts. He did not know the war had already started. He thought he was still managing a crisis. Welcome home. Darling, Marcus said, reaching for me. One of the agents stepped between us, his face like granite. Mrs. Victoria needs rest. The agent grunted. No contact without sterilization. Once inside, I played my first card. I refused to let anyone but Monica bring me my meals. She owes me, I told Marcus, letting my voice tremble with fake vulnerability. I want her to see what she did. I want her to serve me. Marcus's eyes lit up. He saw an opportunity to have his mistress inside the house to monitor me 24/7. He agreed immediately. He did not know that while I was in the hospital, my father's team had wired every room in the mansion with pinhole cameras and high-fidelity microphones. That evening, I sat in my room watching the live feed on a tablet concealed inside a hollowed-out book. In the kitchen, Monica was crushing blue pills into a powder and stirring it into my mushroom soup. Die, you bitch, she muttered to herself, her voice crystal clear through my headphones. When she brought the tray up, I waited until she left the room. I poured the soup into a plastic bag I had taped inside the trash can and flushed the pills down the toilet. Then, I began the performance. When Marcus came in an hour later, I was scratching at my arms, screaming about spiders crawling under my cast. They are everywhere. Marcus, get them off. Please, get them off me, I shrieked. He exchanged a look with Monica, a look of triumph. They believed the psychotropic drugs were working. They relaxed. 2 days later, Marcus went to play golf, leaving his laptop on his desk. He was arrogant enough to leave it unlocked, or perhaps he just thought I was too insane to operate it. I rolled into his study. It took me 10 minutes to mirror his hard drive to a secure server my father's forensic accountants were monitoring. I opened a folder named Vanguard Holdings. It was a masterpiece of fraud. He was siphoning money from his investors into offshore accounts, disguising the theft as consulting fees. But the file that made my breath catch was a PDF dated just 3 days before he broke my leg. It was a life insurance policy on me. The payout was $10 million. The beneficiary was the Marcus Harrison Revocable Trust. It was not an accident. It was a failed execution. I minimized the window and opened a secure browser. I attached the Vanguard files and sent them to the Internal Revenue Service via an anonymous whistleblower portal. Tax fraud was the one thing the government never forgave. The noose was tightening, but I had one more drawer to open. I found a hidden medical file in the bottom of his safe. For years, Marcus had told me I was the reason we could not conceive. He had dragged me to specialists, forced me to take hormone injections that made me sick, and looked at me with pity when the tests came back negative. I opened the report from a clinic in Switzerland he had visited 5 years ago. The diagnosis was clear: sterile, a result of untreated chlamydia from his 20s that had ravaged his system. I stared at the paper. He had let me believe I was broken. He had let me cry myself to sleep, wondering why I could not be a mother, all while he knew his own history was the cause. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but it was not sadness. It was pure, distilled hatred. "You are not just a thief, Marcus," I whispered to the empty room. "You are a dead man walking." I heard the front door open downstairs. He was back. I closed the laptop, wiped my fingerprints from the desk, and rolled back to my room to wait. The trap was set, and he was walking right into the center of it. The art of war is not always about brute force. Sometimes it is about whispering the right lie into the right ear. I began my campaign of psychological dismantling with Monica, the weak link in Marcus's chain of command. I knew Monica's insecurity was her defining trait. She was younger than me, yes, but she knew she was replaceable. I created a fake email thread on a tablet I left carelessly unlocked on the kitchen counter. It appeared to be a conversation between Marcus and a high-end real estate agent in Manhattan, discussing a penthouse for a woman named Chloe, a 22-year-old heiress to a shipping fortune. When Monica brought me my lunch, her eyes kept darting to the tablet. I pretended to doze off. I watched through my eyelashes as she swiped through the emails. Her face went pale. The email read, "Monica is becoming a liability. Once the wife is out of the picture, I need the upgrade ready. Chloe expects the best." Later that afternoon, my mother-in-law arrived to inspect the house. I pulled her close, feigning grogginess. "Mother, please check your jewelry box," I whispered, clutching her wrist. "Monica, she wears your diamond brooch when you are not looking. She laughs about how easy it is to fool you." Mrs. Harrison's vanity was her Achilles heel. She marched out of the room, her face tight with suspicion. I knew she would not find anything missing yet, but the seed was planted. She would watch Monica like a hawk. Paranoia is a fast-acting poison. By evening, Monica was unraveling. I watched on my hidden monitor as she crept into Marcus's study while he was in the shower. She tore through his filing cabinet, looking for proof of this Chloe. She did not find Chloe, but she found something far worse. She found the transfer documents I had flagged earlier. Marcus was moving all liquid assets, including the mortgage money from my house, into an account in the Cayman Islands. The account holder was Marcus Harrison, sole signatory. There was no provision for a partner. The explosion happened at dinner. I sat in my darkened bedroom, sipping a glass of Pinot Noir, the blue light of the tablet illuminating my smile. Downstairs in the dining room, the camera captured everything. "You are stealing everything," Monica screamed, throwing the papers at him. "We were supposed to be partners. You said 50-50. Shut up, you idiot." Marcus roared back, his face flushing a deep, ugly red. "You have no idea how finance works. I am protecting the assets." "You are protecting yourself?" she shrieked. "Who is Chloe? Tell me who she is." Marcus looked confused, which only made him look more guilty. He threw a wine glass against the wall. It shattered, sending shards flying. I took a sip of my own wine, savoring the bouquet. The next morning, I found Monica crying in the hallway. I rolled my wheelchair up to her silently. She jumped when she saw me, wiping her eyes. "Get away from me," she hissed, but there was no heat in it. "Do you think he loves you?" I asked softly. My voice was calm, devoid of the madness I had feigned for days. "He is using you. Monica, you are not his partner. You are his weapon." She stared at me, her lip trembling. "Think about it," I continued, leaning forward. "Who has been bringing me the food? You. Who has been crushing the pills? You. When I die, the autopsy will show an overdose, and whose fingerprints are all over the medicine bottles, not his, yours. He will walk away with the money. and you will go to prison for murder." "No," she whispered, shaking her head. He wouldn't. "He broke my leg because I annoyed him," I said, pointing to my cast. "What do you think he will do to you when you become a burden that night?" Marcus returned home in a foul mood. The IRS had frozen one of his accounts thanks to my anonymous tip, though he did not know the source yet. He needed a punching bag. He found Monica in the living room. "Why is there no dinner?" he shouted. When Monica answered back, he struck her. It was a vicious backhand that sent her sprawling to the floor. "Useless whore," he yelled, kicking her in the ribs. I did not intervene. I sat in my room and pressed the record button. Every blow, every scream, every threat was captured in high-definition audio and video. The file was automatically uploaded to the cloud server shared with my lawyer. They were tearing each other apart, and I had a front row seat. The divide was complete. Now, it was time to conquer. I summoned Marcus to the sunroom the next morning. The winter sun was streaming in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, a stark contrast to the darkness of my plan. I held a pen in my hand, hovering over the power of attorney documents he had drafted. "Marcus," I said, letting my voice crack just enough to sound defeated. "I am tired of fighting. You win. I just want peace." Marcus looked at the pen, his eyes hungry. He reached out to snatch the paper, but I pulled it back. "Not like this," I whispered. "If I am handing over my life's work, I want to do it with dignity, a signing ceremony. Tonight, invite your parents. Invite the board. Invite everyone." He hesitated for a second, but his vanity won. He saw a chance to show off his conquest. "Fine," he grinned, the expression sharp and predatory. "A celebration. I will tell the caterers to prepare for 50 guests by 7 o'clock. He rushed off to make calls, vibrating with the energy of a man who thinks he has just won the lottery. He did not know he was organizing his own funeral. While he was distracted with arrangements, I went to work. My first call was not to a florist, but to a contact number I had extracted from his burner phone. It belonged to the syndicate in New Jersey he owed nearly $4 million to. I sent a simple text, "Marcus has your money. Come and get it. Tonight, 8 o'clock, 12 Oakwood Drive." I attached a photo of the piles of cash Marcus kept in his safe, which I had photographed days ago. Next, I turned my attention to his business partners. Marcus secured contracts by sleeping with the wives of his investors or, in some cases, providing them with escorts. I sent hand-delivered invitations to the wives of Mr. Sterling and Mr. Vance, the two biggest investors in his fake company. The notes were cryptic but irresistible. "Your husband is making a fool of you. Come see the proof tonight." Then came the most delicate piece of the puzzle. I found Monica in the laundry room, applying concealer to a fresh bruise on her cheekbone. She flinched when she saw me. "Look at your face," I said softly. "He did that because dinner was cold. What do you think he will do to you when the police come for him?" She stopped dabbing at the bruise and looked at me, her eyes hollow. "I can get you immunity," I promised. "Testify against him. Tell the truth about the stairs, about the pills, about everything. Or go down with him. It is your choice." She looked at her reflection in the dryer door, then back at me. He told me he would kill me if I left." She trembled. "He won't be able to touch you," I assured her. "Not where he is going." She nodded slowly. The alliance was sealed, with the players in place. I moved to the study. Marcus's presentation for the evening was queued up on the laptop connected to the main projector in the ballroom. It was titled "The Future of Harrison Enterprises." I inserted a flash drive and replaced his file with one of my own. I kept the file name identical, but the content was very different. My phone buzzed. A text from my father. "The assets are in position. We move on your signal." It was time. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the estate. I wheeled myself into the master closet. I looked at the wheelchair. It had been my cage for weeks. a symbol of my helplessness. I pushed it aside. I reached for the pair of sleek, black forearm crutches my father had sent. I gripped the handles. Pain shot up my leg as I put weight on it, a fiery reminder of the bone Marcus had snapped. But I welcomed the pain. It was fuel. I dressed in a black silk gown that clung to my body like armor. I applied dark lipstick, sharpening my features. I looked in the mirror. The victim was gone. The weeping wife was gone. Showtime, I whispered to my reflection. I opened the bedroom door and stepped out into the hallway, the rubber tips of my crutches striking the floor with a rhythmic, ominous thud. I was not just walking to a party, I was walking to an execution. The ballroom was a sea of black ties and designer gowns, filled with the hum of expensive conversation. Marcus stood at the podium, looking every bit the titan of industry he pretended to be. He tapped his spoon against a crystal flute, the sharp ring silencing the room. Friends, partners, Marcus beamed, sweeping his arm toward the empty spot where I was supposed to be sitting in my wheelchair. Thank you for coming. Tonight is not just about business. It is about resilience. To my wife, Victoria, whose strength in the face of her accident inspires me every day. And to the future of Harrison Enterprises, to the future, the crowd echoed. Marcus adjusted his tie, his smile widening as he turned to the massive projection screen behind him. I have prepared a brief presentation on our quarterly projections, he said, pressing the remote with a flourish. As you will see, our growth is exponential. The screen flickered to life, but instead of a bar graph showing rising profits, high-definition footage of our living room appeared. It was dated 3 weeks ago. The timestamp in the corner marked the moment of my return from the charity trip. The room went deadly silent. On screen, Marcus shoved me. The audience gasped. Then came the sound. The sickening, wet crunch of my tibia snapping under his boot echoed through the ballroom speakers, amplified to a terrifying volume. What? What is this? Marcus stammered, his face draining of color. He jabbed the remote button frantically. Turn it off. Someone cut the power. It is a deep fake, a hack. The video cut, but the horror did not end. It was replaced by a static image of Marcus and his mother, accompanied by a crystal-clear audio recording. She is taking too long to die, Mother, Marcus's recorded voice sneered, dripping with malice. The painkillers are not strong enough to mask the symptoms of the necrosis. Just increase the dose. Marcus, his mother's voice replied, shrill and impatient. We need that trust fund before the end of the fiscal year. If she survives, we lose the house. In the front row, Mrs. Harrison dropped her champagne glass. It shattered on the floor, but no one looked down. Every eye was fixed on the stage. The investors began to back away, whispering furiously. Lies, all lies, Marcus screamed, throwing the remote at the screen. Security, get these people out. Nobody is leaving. A female voice cut through the chaos. The spotlight shifted to the side of the stage. Monica stood there, clutching a microphone with both hands. Her face was bruised, the makeup doing little to hide the swelling from Marcus's backhand the night before. He is sterile, Monica announced, her voice shaking at first, then gaining strength. He has been sterile for 10 years. He made you all believe Victoria was barren, but it was him. He showed me the medical records. Shut your mouth, you whore, Marcus roared, taking a step toward her. And he promised me half of her fortune. Monica continued, tears streaming down her face. He planned to kill her. He made me poison her soup. It was never an accident. The sound of rhythmic thuds on the hardwood floor drew the room's attention to the double doors. Thud, step, thud, step. I walked in. I was not in the wheelchair. I was upright, supported by black forearm crutches, looking like the specter of vengeance he thought he had crushed. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. I walked straight to the base of the stage and looked up at the man I had married. You wanted my assets. Marcus, I asked, my voice calm and carrying to every corner of the silent room. He stared down at me, his chest heaving, trapped like a rat. I signed the papers this morning, I said, a cold smile touching my lips, but not the ones you think. I liquidated the entire cash reserve of the trust, all $50 million. His eyes bulged. You can't. It is gone. I told him. I donated every single cent to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence in your name. You broke my leg for nothing. You are bankrupt. Something inside Marcus snapped. The veneer of the civilized businessman vanished completely. He let out a feral growl and leaped off the stage, his hands reaching for my throat. I will kill you, he screamed. He never touched me. Before he could cover the distance, 3 men in dark suits materialized from the crowd. My father's lead bodyguard caught Marcus in midair, slamming him into the floor with a bone-shaking thud. I did not flinch. I just stood there, leaning on my crutches, watching the monster writhe on the ground. The party was over. The punishment had begun. The chaos in the ballroom had barely registered when the heavy double doors at the entrance were kicked open. The security guards I had hired stood aside, letting the new arrivals pass. 5 men in leather jackets and heavy boots marched in. They did not look like the investors or the socialites trembling in their seats. They looked like brute force personified. These were the debt collectors from the New Jersey syndicate, the men Marcus had been dodging for months. They did not waste time with pleasantries. The lead enforcer walked up to the buffet table and shoved a crystal ice sculpture of a swan onto the floor. It shattered into 1,000 diamonds. "Where is the money?" Harrison the man shouted, his voice booming over the terrified murmurs of the crowd. "You sent us a picture of cash. We are here to collect." Marcus, still pinned to the floor by my father's bodyguard, struggled to lift his head. His eyes widened in absolute terror as he recognized them. He knew that prison was bad, but these men were worse. They began overturning tables, smashing the vintage wine bottles Marcus had bought with my money. The scent of expensive Bordeaux mixed with the metallic smell of fear in the room. Before the syndicate could get their hands on Marcus, the side exits burst open. FBI nobody move. Dozens of agents in tactical gear swarmed the room, weapons drawn. The syndicate members froze, realizing they had walked into a trap within a trap. An agent marched up to Marcus, who was now weeping into the carpet. "Marcus Harrison, you are under arrest for securities fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder," the agent announced, reading the rights with mechanical precision. Mrs. Harrison, witnessing her son's destruction, scrambled toward me. Her mascara was running down her face, turning her into a grotesque mask of despair. She grabbed the sleeve of my dress, her nails digging into the silk. "Victoria, please." "You have to stop this," she shrieked, her voice hysterical. "He is your husband. We are family. You can't let them take him. He is all we have." I looked down at her hand on my arm with disgust. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. I held it up for the nearest officer to see. It was the video from my bedroom, clear as day, showing Mrs. Harrison opening my jewelry box and sliding my emerald brooch into her purse. "Officer," I said, my voice cutting through her sobbing. "This woman is in possession of stolen property valued at $50,000. I would like to press charges." The officer nodded and pulled Mrs. Harrison away. As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, her pleas turned to vile curses. "You ungrateful witch," she screamed as she was dragged away. "I hope you rot." I turned my attention back to the center of the room. My father, Alexander, walked in through the main doors. He moved with the slow, terrifying grace of a predator who has already won. He stopped right in front of Marcus. Marcus was pressed flat against the floorboards, his face mashed against the wood in the exact spot where I had lain in agony weeks ago. The symmetry was perfect. My father looked down at him, his expression devoid of pity. "I told you," my father said, his voice low and dangerous. "Nobody touches my daughter and remains whole." Marcus tried to speak, but only a choked sob came out. To the left, I saw Monica being escorted out in handcuffs. She caught my eye. She did not cry. She knew the deal. She would serve a few years, but she would live. She looked at Marcus, who was wetting himself in fear, and she smirked. It was a cold, satisfied smile. She had picked the winning side just in time. Agents began placing yellow tape over the furniture and the doors. "This property is now a crime scene and a seized asset of the federal government," an agent announced to the stunned guests. "Everyone must vacate the premises immediately." 2 agents hauled Marcus to his feet. He could barely stand. His legs were shaking so violently they looked like they might snap. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for a mercy I did not possess. "Victoria, please, tell them," he stammered. "Tell them what I asked," leaning on my crutches, feeling stronger with every passing second. "That you loved me, or that you loved my money." They dragged him out. He screamed my name, a long, desperate wail that faded as the doors closed behind him. I stood in the ruined ballroom, surrounded by broken glass and overturned tables. My leg throbbed, a dull ache deep in the bone, but the crushing weight on my chest was gone. I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had felt in 5 years. Justice did not just feel good. It felt like oxygen. The wheels of justice turn slowly for the poor, but for the daughter of Alexander, they spin with terrifying speed. 1 week was all it took. The mountain of evidence my father's team had compiled was insurmountable. We had video, audio, financial records, and the sworn testimony of his own mistress. It was not a trial. It was a slaughter. I sat in the front row, wearing a suit of pristine white, a sharp contrast to the drab gray of the courtroom. Marcus sat at the defense table, hunched over and defeated. He looked small. My legal team had executed a scorched earth policy on his finances before the trial even began. We had frozen every account and placed liens on every asset. He could not afford the high-powered criminal defense attorney he had bragged about hiring. Instead, he was represented by a court-appointed public defender, a tired man with a stained tie who had met Marcus only 20 minutes before the proceedings began. The judge, a stern woman with zero tolerance for domestic abusers, did not hesitate. "Marcus Harrison," she announced, looking down at him over her spectacles, "for the crimes of wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering, and attempted murder. I sentence you to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole for at least 20 years. Marcus slumped forward, his forehead hitting the table. Behind him, in the gallery, his parents wailed. But their punishment was just beginning. They were found guilty of conspiracy and aiding and abetting. They were not going to prison due to their age, but I had ensured a fate they would find far worse. The court seized their assets to pay restitution, their sprawling retirement home, their cars, their country club memberships. Everything was gone. They would spend their remaining years in a state-subsidized efficiency apartment, living on meager welfare checks, stripped of the status they worshipped. I was not done. The day after the sentencing, I executed the final financial maneuver. I purchased the distressed debt of the Harrison family company for pennies on the dollar. As the new majority creditor, I had the right to call in the loans immediately. I forced the company into Chapter 7 liquidation. I did not sell it to save it. I sold it for parts. I dissolved the brand. The name Harrison would no longer be associated with business or prestige. It would be synonymous with failure and fraud. I ensured that their legacy died before they did. 2 days later, I visited Marcus at the detention center. I sat on a metal stool on the visitor's side of the glass partition. Marcus was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. He looked 10 years older. His head was shaved, and the arrogance that had defined him was replaced by a desperate, pathetic hunger for connection. He picked up the phone, his hand trembling. "Victoria," he breathed, his voice cracking. "You came. Does this mean you forgive me? We can appeal. You can help me." I did not pick up the phone immediately. I just looked at him. Then, I slid a single piece of paper through the document slot. "Read it," I said into the receiver. He unfolded the paper. It was not a divorce settlement. It was the DNA analysis from the clinic in Switzerland, accompanied by a fresh confirmation from a lab I had hired to reanalyze his medical history. I don't understand," he stammered, his eyes darting across the page. "It says you are sterile." "Marcus," I said, my voice cold and steady. "You have always been sterile. All those years you made me feel broken. You made me cry over negative pregnancy tests. It was you. You are the end of your line. There will be no legacy, no children, no heir to carry on your name. You are a biological dead end." He stared at the paper, his mouth opening and closing. This hurt him more than the prison sentence. His ego was the only thing he had left, and I had just crushed it. Why, he whispered, tears spilling onto his cheeks. "Why are you doing this?" I leaned forward, pressing my hand against the cold glass. "You broke my leg because I slapped your mistress," I said, looking deep into his terrified eyes. "But I broke your entire life because you dared to betray me." I hung up the phone. I stood up and turned my back on him. Behind me, I could hear him screaming, slamming his fists against the glass, shouting incoherent pleas that no one would ever listen to again. I walked out of the visiting room and did not look back. I stood on the manicured lawn of the Hamptons estate for the final time. The ocean breeze was cold, biting at my cheeks, but I did not feel the chill. I felt only the heat of anticipation. Behind me, the engines of 3 massive bulldozers idled, their diesel fumes mixing with the salt air. To anyone else, this was an architectural masterpiece worth millions of dollars. To me, it was a mausoleum. It was the place where my husband had broken my body and where his mistress had tried to poison my mind. I had given the crew a very specific instruction. I told them I did not want the structure renovated. I did not want it sold. I wanted it erased. When I told my father to leave no survivors, I meant the memories too. "Are you ready, Victoria?" my father asked. He stood beside me, looking immaculate in his trench coat. "Do it," I commanded, my voice steady. The foreman signaled the drivers. The roar of the engines drowned out the crashing waves. The first blade slammed into the front porch, the wood splintering with a satisfying crack. I watched as the heavy steel bucket tore through the living room wall. I saw the Italian leather sofa, the one where I had found Marcus and Monica, get crushed under tons of debris. The wall where Marcus had thrown his wine glass crumbled into dust. It was violent. It was loud. It was perfect. As the roof caved in, sending a plume of drywall dust into the sky, my father turned to me. He reached out and gently took the ugly, clinical aluminum crutches from my arms. In their place, he handed me a sleek, black cane made of polished ebony, topped with a silver handle in the shape of a phoenix. "You do not need those anymore," he said, his eyes warm. "You are not a patient. You are a queen who has reclaimed her throne." I gripped the cane. It felt solid and heavy in my hand. I tested my weight on my leg. The pain was still there, a dull ache that might never fully leave, but it no longer felt like weakness. It felt like a reminder. It was a scar that proved I had survived the worst betrayal imaginable and come out stronger. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wedding ring. The diamond caught the sunlight, glittering with a false promise of forever. I did not feel sadness. I looked at the ring and saw only a shackle I had finally unlocked. I walked as close to the rubble as safety allowed. The house was now just a pile of twisted metal and broken stone. Burn in hell. Marcus, I whispered. I tossed the ring into the chaos. It disappeared instantly under the tread of a bulldozer, buried forever beneath the ruins of the life I used to have. I turned my back on the destruction. I did not look over my shoulder as the final chimney collapsed. I walked toward the waiting limousine. My gait was uneven, a rhythmic tap of the cane against the pavement, but my head was high. I was limping, but I was moving forward. The driver held the door open for me. I slid into the leather seat, the scent of fresh possibilities filling the air. My father settled in beside me and tapped on the partition. "Where to?" "Ma'am," the driver asked. "Forward," I said, watching the empty lot disappear from view as the window rolled up. "Just drive forward." The car pulled away, leaving nothing behind but a patch of bare earth. The slate was clean. The survivors were gone, and I was finally free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope you found satisfaction in seeing justice served today. Please let me know in the comments section below where you are listening to this story from. I would love to connect and hear your thoughts on Victoria's revenge. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and support us by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.